Some books are 1 star, some books are 3 stars, some books are 5 stars, and then there's books that stay with us for a really long time. Hello reader friends and everyone else who stopped by. Today we're going to be talking about the book that has been helping me get out of a reading slump, and it was a book you guys chose. So we're going to do a little bit of a book review, and we're going to talk about how I approached this book to help me out of a reading slump. The first thing that you need to know is that this is a book that's part of a series that I had already started reading. And so I was already familiar with the world, I was already familiar with the characters, and I already knew that it was a story that I liked. That's probably one of the reasons why this story helped me get out of a reading slump. Now, I can't say it was just the one book because I am reading a series of books in order for me to get back into the reading rhythm. Now that I am 3 books deep into this challenge, I can definitely tell you that that book set a really good tone for my experience and my getting out of the reading slump. This book was part of a TBR that I chose for myself based on books that I was more interested in or books that I was gravitating towards, and you guys chose the order in which I would read them. This book tied for first place with a different book that I'm going to make a different video on, but I'm so glad this is where I started because it was lighthearted, it was simple, it was familiar, and it was interesting enough for me to get out of a reading slump. And the book that I am talking about is, of course, Apprentice to the Villain, which is the second book from the Assistant to the Villain series. This first book, I read it a while back, and it was such an interesting, cute, fun book to read. And of course, the second book did not disappoint. This was a 5-star. I don't remember if I actually put 5 stars on my apps, but now that I've been thinking about it for a couple days, I've already read 2 other books, and I keep thinking about it, I realized that, yeah, this book deserves 5 stars because it's not just a book that was really good. It's a book that I know is going to stay with me. Now, I do have to say that the reason why I think this book is going to stay with me for a while, it's not just the fact that the book was really good, but also the way that I approached it. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that there were different things that I was going to try out in order for me to be able to get out of the reading slump. Some of those were recommendations from other people. Some of those were things that I came up with that have worked for me in the past, and I have a whole dedicated video for that, so you can go and watch that to know more. But the things that I did with this book that were different from how I usually approach reading was, one, reading one book at a time, which is a super weird thing for me to do. I'm always reading multiple things. Another thing was double formats. I started with the physical book. I read at a slower pace, and I read until I felt like I was deep in the story and understanding what was going on. I allowed myself to go back in moments where my brain just zoned out, and I reread things. I think that I got so caught up in this idea that I had to just finish something that I forgot that the point was also to understand it. And so that's one of my main goals for this challenge. I allowed myself to do that both with the physical book and the audiobook. Once I reached a good enough point, I started the audiobook and I just finished it all the way through. Now, I did not allow myself to put the book in 2 times speed. I did 1.5, which is a lot slower than what I usually read. And I'm glad I did that because I enjoyed the book a lot better just because of the fact that I understood what was going on. I was deep in the story, and it was going at a pace that felt more natural. Usually, I just listen to books really, really quickly, and if I zone out a little bit, I don't know what's going on. And sometimes, usually, I just push through and just keep going and hope that I'm gonna figure it out at some point because other context clues will tell me what actually happened. But I didn't want that for this read. I didn't want that to continue to be the case of how I approach my books. And so making that switch of going back, replaying things, and reading at a slower pace definitely helped a lot. Now let's talk about the book. This book is lighthearted. This is a book that it's more on the simpler side of fantasy. It's definitely a book that feels very comedic, very cartoonish almost. I, in my head, watched this book as a cartoon. specifically the style of old-timey Cartoon Network cartoons. And I don't know what it is, but it just felt like if this book were to get an adaptation, I really hope it's an animation and not a live action. Because I don't think a live action would capture the essence and the style of this book as much as an animation would. So I think that this would be a really good book either to turn into a cartoon or to even turn into a comic. It's such a fun story, even though it does mention, unaliving people and body parts disconnected from other body parts and, things that are usually really grotesque. The book deals with it in such an unserious way, and it's so not the point of the book that you can enjoy it without it being like a triggering thing, in my opinion, at least. And so this book is just really, really fun to read, and I think it was an excellent choice for me to read it as someone that was in a really bad reading slump. What is this book about? Well, if you haven't read the first book, assistant to the villain follows Evie, Sage, and Tristan, whatever his last name is that I don't remember. She is a normal girl from the village. She's trying to get a job because she is the sole breadwinner for her family. Her dad is ill, her mom is who knows where, and she has a little sister. Living in a village, being a woman, it's a difficult space to get a good job that allows you to feed your family. And so she ends up somehow, which I'm not gonna spoil, getting a job with the villain, the guy that everyone has been told to be afraid of. The king has made it his mission to make everyone think that the villain is a horrible, horrible person. But as it happens with many other stories, the one, with the propaganda is actually the bad guy, not the one that guy is trying to discredit. And so the villain does do what he needs to do in order to, keep himself safe and his people and defend himself from the king. But ultimately, he's not really a bad guy. And so in the first book, we see how him and Evie start getting to know each other. He employs her, and she's basically his assistant. She does clerical work, she does other work, and she's just this very bubbly character. Him on the other side, he's the grumpy. He is the very serious guy with the walls and the guy that does not want to feel. And then he gets this new employee that he decided to hire, and she's the opposite. She's such a sunshine. She's so happy. She's so quirky. She is always smiling and finds so much joy in so many things, and she just lightens the mood for everyone. And so in the second book, we actually have a portion where they mention that the guards aren't even that scary or mean anymore because they got so used to Evie's personality being so bubbly and friendly. And so, the villain gets really annoyed with her, but eventually he warms up to her. He doesn't fire her or anything. He just doesn't want to accept that he likes her, and he doesn't want to accept that he has feelings for her. So the first book deals with him and some of his family members, and deals with, of course, his rivalry with the king, which is a whole thing. Book 2 starts in a doozy. Beware of the spoilers that I'm giving. But in the second book, we think Evie is not alive because of a plan that was put into place to save Tristan, who was in a dungeon in the king's castle, trapped, unable to use his magic because the king decided that now that he's captured, now he's going to publicly humiliate him and publicly make him seem like a horrible, horrible person. And so Evie ends up dead, supposedly. And the king's objective is to show her in her coffin, in a glass coffin, of all things, so that the people can see how horrible Tristan is. What he's not counting on is that Tristan has people that actually like him and people who want to save him. And so this is all part of a master plan to save him and get him out of the dungeons. Of course, Evie is not dead. Like, she is very well alive. But there's some people that help her with this plan that once you find out who they are, it's gonna take you on a spin. Not to mention that no one told Tristan this plan because, well, there was no way of telling him because he was in a dungeon. And so they only found out where he was and they were trying to get to him and save him. There is a character from book 1 that I absolutely do not like, but had a great redemption arc in this book. She's terrible to Evie in the first book, but in this book, they work together. There's other characters that I absolutely love. There's a dragon that is named Fluffy, I think, and I think that's hilarious and adorable. And then there's Kingsley. Let's take a moment for Kingsley. Kingsley is this little frog over here. Kingsley used to be a prince that ended up turned into a frog. Book 2 tells you how he ended up in that situation. He used to be a really, really good friend of Tristan's, and they continue to be really good friends. The thing is that now he's a frog, so he can't talk. So what does he do? He holds up little signs for people to read. And it's very funny because of the timing. The timing of his signs is so perfect and it annoys Tristan so much. It's hilarious. I have to say that I love how this book is just funny. There's so many things going on, so many serious situations, so many high emotions, and yet it's so lighthearted because of the balance with the comedy. Evie goes through a lot of stuff in this book. She's betrayed by people that were important to her. She finds out that she had been lied to by other people, and basically she is forced to not just be Tristan's assistant, but as the title suggests, become his apprentice. By the time that this book ends, Evie is no longer just Tristan's shadow or a more passive, bubbly character. She has a backbone. She goes through stuff. She puts herself in situations that she needs to put herself through. She comes out victorious and becomes even stronger. The cliffhanger that this book ended on, oh my gosh, that was insane. First book did have a little bit of a cliffhanger, but not as intense as I felt this second one, or at least maybe I just don't remember. But I do feel more of an urge to grab book 3 than I felt to grab book 2 when I finished book 1, even though I absolutely loved it. Now, book 3 is here. I'm in the middle of this challenge. So I'm in this conundrum because what am I supposed to do now? Do I read this book right now? Do I wait to finish the challenge? I feel like I should finish the challenge first. But I really, really want to read this book. And I already pre-ordered book 4, which is going to come out, I think, in like a month or so. So I'm very excited about that. So, stay tuned for that because I'm probably going to finish this series this video series and dive into that book. Possibly, maybe. That's the plan. Who knows? Because as you know, I'm a huge mood reader. So who knows if I'm going to feel the same way in the next couple weeks. But I'm trying to stay strong and not start multiple books because that was one of my main rules. I cannot start multiple books. So anyway, back to the books. We see a lot of character growth. We see a lot of development for both Tristan and for Evie. Evie, because she's not naive. She's not soft anymore. She's a badass now. From the beginning to the end of this book, she shows that she really has what it takes to defend herself, to help other people, to defend other people. She cares deeply and she's a warrior. She even starts training for, combat and all of these things. And I think that is amazing. Tristan, on the other hand, he starts to lower his walls. he has no other option than to accept that he has feelings for her, and he accepts that he cares about her so deeply that he needs to keep her safe, not just because she's, his employee, but because he actually does care about her in a personal level. This is a slow burn, okay? These two people love each other and neither of them accept it, or at least they don't act on it. Tristan doesn't want to accept it, Evie does accept it. But then they are put in this situation where, from her standpoint, it's unrequited love. From his standpoint is, if I love her, I need to protect her. And protecting her means not pursuing her. But she doesn't know that. My heart ached the entire time that I was reading this book because I just want them to be together so bad. But I understand why he's being so cautious about it. And I understand why she keeps guarding her heart, because he keeps breaking it, because he doesn't want to act on his emotions. And they do have a slip up at some point in the book. They do sort of act on it for a moment, but then he completely switches and he's like, no, like, this is never gonna happen. We're not gonna be a thing, blah, blah, blah. That moment drove me insane and broke my heart. But again, it makes sense, because he knows that she's in danger and he doesn't want her to be in danger. So there's a lot more that happens. Obviously, we have some side stories that are also romance and some other situations going on. We have other relationships that they have with other characters that need to be dealt with, especially her. Her family, there's so much going on with her family, but she has to deal with a lot of things. She has to do a very, very difficult thing in this book. But ultimately, it was well deserved, in my opinion. I'm not going to say what it is, but it had to happen. That's just my opinion. And of course, there's a lot of her trying to deal with forgiveness for other characters. There's just so much. Like, this book, as cartoony, as silly, as quirky, as fun, as entertaining as it is, it just catches you off guard when it suddenly either touches on a really deep topic and makes you reflect on your own life, or it just throws you a curveball with a really deep quote, and a character just throws a whole bunch of wisdom. Especially Evie's little sister, that's like 12 years old or something. That child is so wise. That child understands the world and the situations in a way that they don't give her credit for in the beginning. They don't think she's capable of it. And then she just surprises them with all of this emotional maturity. She's such a cute character. And I fear for her and I fear for Kingsley, because I feel like a lot of times part of what authors like to do is get rid of characters who are very lovable. Side characters that are really cute, that are really just like innocent souls, and somehow they get dealt the worst card. So I will lose my mind if something happens to Evie's little sister or to Kingsley. And I fear that Kingsley is gonna be the one that's gonna get the bad situation happening, because I've seen it in other books. The cute mascot looking character or the cute side character usually has an issue. And we had Kingsley in the first book and in the second. In the first book, I think we somewhat learn about her little sister, but we don't really get a lot of her. We get a lot of her in the second book, because now she's living with them. Kingsley is just there from the beginning. So I feel like Kingsley's gonna be the one that's gonna end up, unfortunately, getting sacrificed. And then Evie's little sister is probably gonna be like this character that becomes like a secret weapon or something. I don't know. I don't know what the time jump is going to be between all of the books. I think that book 3 is gonna pick up where book 2 left off. But obviously, because I haven't read book 3, I don't know what book 4 is gonna look like. So there is a chance, I guess, that we will see an older version of Evie's little sister and put her in more like serious roles. But for now, she's a little kid. So she's kind of in the sidelines, even though she throws you a wisdom ball here and there. I don't know also how many books this series is gonna have. So there's also that. The series, I believe, is ongoing. I haven't heard anything about a book 5, but I also haven't heard anything about book 4 being the ending. Haven't really done a lot of research, so who knows. I might actually go and do that to check, but also I kind of don't want to put myself in that position just yet because I'm only on book 2. And I don't want to already think like the series is gonna end in book 4, yada yada, and then have that in my head like, oh my gosh, this is about to end. And, you know, like be in this position where I'm not looking for the series to end and end up, you know, extending the time that it takes me to read it. But, you know, that's just me overthinking it. I ultimately have to say that this was a phenomenal book, and I know this book is gonna stick with me. This is gonna be probably a book that I'm going to recommend to people a lot. It's gonna be a series that I'm probably gonna recommend to people who are not really big readers, because I feel like it's simple enough that you don't have to put so much brain power into it, but it's also deep enough that it keeps you intrigued and entertained. I feel like as much as it's a very lighthearted book, it doesn't read in a childish way, but it still reads in a way that it does feel like a cartoon, like I said. It does feel like a book that any age can enjoy, at least so far. There's not a lot of topics that would be, I guess, too much or too mature. The way that these topics are dealt with is very like superficial and like, you know, not in a deep, grotesque way at all. And there's no spice. At least so far, there's no spice. There is some mention of like physical love things, I guess, but not that deep. Like the most that happens in this book is that Evie and Tristan kiss in a moment. That's it. There are thoughts that each of them have about each other, but they don't actually act on, you know, any of that. I don't know if that's gonna change in the rest of the series. So I don't want to make any claims that these are books for kids, or not kids, but like teenagers. But they're definitely books for someone like 18, 19 years old, I would say. Like, and for people who don't like too graphic of any kind of those topics. So it's a safe bet for someone who wants to get into reading. It's a safe bet for someone that wants something that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable. It's definitely not that kind of book. So with that said, let me know in the comments, have you read the series? Is this something that you would read if you haven't? And what other books are similar would you recommend? Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned because the video where I'm going to be discussing the next book that I read in this challenge is definitely coming. That other book, you probably already know if you've seen the other video, but if you haven't, go and check it out. That book, there was a lot. It was a lot. I'm glad I started with Apprentice to the Villain and not that other book, because the other book was a lot to think about, a lot to feel. It was a very tense book, but it was a perfect follow-up for this book because I was already in a really good reading rhythm and I was already in a really good mental space to dive into something that really made me think and analyze life. So thank you again for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.